Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. And a couple quick things of housekeeping here. The first is, many of you know, I'm a Cortel dealer and been getting a lot of requests lately for harnesses, the new Cannibal and that kind of thing. Just a heads up that Cortel is not alone here, coming out of the whole COVID thing and all the supply chain problems. If you're wanting a wing or a harness or anything, pretty much across the brands, as I understand it, the wait times right now are really, really long. So be thinking about that. And if you're hoping to get something for this summer, you're probably already too late. So just be thinking about that. And whoever you get your gear from, reach out and get stuff, get in the queue, get in the line. Because I know a lot of people are pretty disappointed they're not going to be able to get their stuff for comps that they have this season and that kind of thing. So it's just the nature of the beast right now. The other thing I wanted to mention is SkySight. We did a podcast with Matt, they're the main developer there, quite a while back, and I have been using this platform a lot more lately, and it's just absolutely terrific. So I just wanted to give them a little bit of a shout out. Their models are fantastic. We used them a lot in the X-Alps, and I've been thinking about them lately because my guest today is Benjamin Kellett down in New Zealand. He makes these incredible films. Go to the show notes to find all the links, but look him up on YouTube. He makes these amazing films about his bivvy trips down in the Southern Alps down in New Zealand, and really good instructional stuff and amazing audio. He's a terrific filmmaker and editor. So the talk I had with him is great, but you'll hear in the show we talk about SkySight quite a bit, and it's one of the forecasting tools he really relies on down there. So check it out, skysight.io. And let's get into this talk with Benjamin. Benjamin came onto my radar because of our editor, Miles Connolly, and said, hey man, you gotta check this guy out. He's doing some really cool stuff. And I looked him up on YouTube and got sucked into the film vortex that he's been making there, right deep down in the rabbit hole. And his films are amazing. They're really fun, and he's obviously putting a ton of effort into it. It's kind of a passion project and kind of just sharing the stoke of paragliding. So as you'll see in this show and as you'll see in his films, he's a very consummately optimistic guy, and he's incredibly stoked on the Skycrack and having a lot of fun. So we talk about his gear and how he forecasts and how he approaches bivvy, how he got into it, and where he's going. And it's a lot of fun. So enjoy this talk with, actually, I was going to say Kiwi, but he's not. He's a Brit, but he's been down in New Zealand for a long time now. And enjoy this talk with Benjamin Kellett. Cheers. Benjamin, great to have you on the show. I'm really excited that our editor, Miles, put me onto you because it sucked me into down the rabbit hole watching all your films. Fantastic stuff, man. And I've been in that side of the game a little bit too, not as much in the creation side like you have, but I know how difficult that is. And I understand you're doing all your own editing, and we'll have the links up obviously in the show notes to your films. And so our listeners can go and watch what you've been doing down in New Zealand, but fantastic stuff, and really excited to talk to you.
Oh, thanks, mate. Thanks for having us on. And you don't know this, but you've been my hiking companion for many years now. And yeah, what you're doing is amazing. So yeah, I'm really stoked to be a part of it. So thanks for having me on.
Oh, wicked. Well, where I thought we'd start, because I don't know it. Tell me your history of flying. How'd you get into this? How long you been doing it? And when did you start making the films?
So I couldn't really tell you why I started paragliding. It was kind of just one of those things that just happened, like I think I just had I did absolutely no research. I hadn't really no idea about it. I didn't know you could fly cross country or any of this stuff. In the beginning, I just thought it was sled rides, So, it was 7 years ago. I'm living in Queenstown, and obviously there's a lot of tandem flying here. So I see them flying off the gondola and all of this. And I think I just had I had the spare $250 one day, and I needed a new hobby. It's summer. So I go out to Flight Park, which is our local spot, and did the intro day. The intro day, they just sort of teach you to launch and land, it's just an introductory. And at the end of the day, they go, well, if you come back tomorrow, you can fly off Coronet Peak. I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to come back and fly off the Coronet Peak. That's got to happen. And then that just totally got me. And throughout the rest of the course, I just, just learned more and more and more. And they told me, oh, you can do this. You can do aerobatics. You can fly long distance and you can access these cool places and you can go up to the cloud. I'm like, oh, well, this is me. I'm set. This is wicked. But yeah, like I learned in New Zealand. I'm originally from the UK. So yeah, some might pick up. I've got a bit of a mongrel accent at times. I moved here when I was. I moved here when I started saying yeah nah, and stuff like that. That'll be why. But I moved here when I was 19. So I've been here knocking on 11 years now. I originally came here to snowboard, but so skateboarding led me to snowboarding. Snowboarding brought me to the mountains, and the mountains gave me paragliding. But yeah, full blown home now.
I recognize Coronet Peak right off the bat because when I was young, I was really into ski racing, and that's one of my fondest memories was skiing Coronet Peak. Do you guys remember? Do you remember one of New Zealand's most famous racers? Was a guy named Simon Wairutini.
Oh yeah,
he was on the national team for a bunch of years. Just a mad skier. He was insanely fast, and I got to follow him down Coronet Peak.
Oh, epic.
Years ago.
Yeah.
A bunch of air. It was fantastic, but I wasn't a pilot then. And that's what struck me in your videos was I wasn't a pilot when I was in New Zealand. That was a long time ago, but it was, you can topland anywhere. It just looks terrific for what you're doing for vol biv and for multi-day assaults on the mountains. I didn't realize that. I mean, I saw Nick Nain and stuff, and I've seen people doing these, really cool south to north traverses kind of thing, but I didn't realize the terrain was so. I always think of New Zealand as being treed and wet.
It depends which side of the divide you're on, but certainly the west of the divide is very wet, and we get predominantly the weather coming from the west, and it all sort of dumps on the west coast, and it's a bit of a jungle out there. But east of the divide, which is most of the island, is totally fine. I mean, there are some areas further north where you've got some more pine trees, and there are some areas where there's some beech trees, but certainly the bushline sits up at like 1,500 meters. So even where there is trees and stuff, you can totally top land and camp and keep going. The only thing that holds us back is the weather. I mean, at the end of the day, we are a mountainous country that's just sort of risen out of the sea. So it does get complex at times, and you can get some gnarly sea breezes and things like that. And we don't often get really long stretches of good weather, but certainly there's some like 3 or 4 days, and that it's just brilliant. Yeah, it is really a great place for vol biv, and I think New Zealand will naturally breed vol biv pilots, because in order to do good distance here, you kind of have to fly into terrain that requires you to be prepared to stay out for a few nights. And, so if you want to do some big cross country, start getting the gear and you're thinking about it, even if you're not inclined to do vol biv in the first place. And before you know it, you're doing vol biv and you're having the best time. And there's a really good crew, and the scene is growing here massively, which is really exciting.
That's really exciting. So there's more and more pilots every year. It's a growing sport in New Zealand.
Yeah, exponentially.
Really?
Say specifically with vol biv. So we're increasing pilot numbers, but what's really happening, and especially we can thank COVID for this a lot, is that a lot of people have got more spare time now. So we've got a lot of tandem pilots that work here, and a lot of people that work in the industry, and a lot of people who fly that maybe got full-time jobs. But with all their extra time now, and New Zealand's been locked off to the rest of the world for a couple of years. We've been a bit of a hermit country. So the tourism industry's died, and everyone's just got this extra time, and everyone's just sending it out the back. It's great. So the level of pilot is exponential. So, if you go back, Tim Percival, he put he's on the comp committee here. He put a really interesting article up in our magazine, Airborne, and he's comparing statistics of our community year on year, and the distance in which everybody's flying, and it's going through the roof. Everyone's just improving and skilling up and having a blast. So it's pretty exciting to see. It's pretty exciting to be a part of, and the community's in really good health.
Did you get into vol biv pretty quick then? So you go up to Coronet Peak the next day, you fly, and then start realizing the potential pretty quickly? Because I was the same way. When I first flew, I thought you just launched off the mountain and landed at the parking lot. I had no idea. It wasn't until I saw the X-Alps that I went, wait, what?
Yeah.
What are these people doing?
Yeah, it's kind of it took me a couple of times of having some pretty rubbish attempts at flying cross country that quickly put me in areas that I had to walk for long periods. And I thought, what am I like spending the rest of the day walking out? This is a pretty cool campsite, like I could probably just stay here and do it. And then you start thinking, what really got me into Volbiv as well is that there was places that I wanted to fly and they seemed really cool and but they're quite remote. So you have to be prepared. So you just start getting the gear and then you go. And then, do you know what I'm going to do today is I'm planning, I'm going to go and stay out. And that completely changed my mentality. And that's been a big step for people flying cross country here is that if you stop worrying about bombing out in the back and having to walk for days and start thinking, I'm going to go and bomb out the back and go camping and it's going to be awesome, then you most likely just fly right through there and you're just not thinking about it anymore. And it really changes the way we fly. Right. And that's kind of what happened to me. I started going, I want to go camping. And then those two things happened together. And then I started flying further and further. And then the adventure just got bigger and bigger.
For those who haven't flown in New Zealand, we were talking before we started recording, you were saying about the remoteness that, it's the South Island is quite a bit more remote than the North, but you were saying you don't really ever get too far away from towns, villages. What?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like you can quite easily, like there's not many towns and villages. There's not really any public transport. There's no trains. There's no real bus services apart from the ones that go around the cities, which we have few of. Some valleys have got roads up them. Some don't. Some of those roads are dirt roads that only have, a couple of cars coming up and down a day. But more or less, I would say with a good set of walking legs on you, you should be able to get back to at least an unsealed road within 2 to 3 days, especially if you stay east of the divide. If you start going west of the divide, your hours per kilometer start going through the roof because the bush is just so thick. Yeah, it's pretty heinous. But there's some places like that east of the divide that I've found as well. But yeah, generally speaking, 2 to 3 days max, and if you're decent level of fitness, you should be able to get back out again, which for me is, like if I start flying somewhere like, if I muck up and I've got a week full of bushwhacking, then I'm not really so keen anymore. But 2 days is enough that it's an adventure and it's exciting and that, you've got that capability to get out and go camping. And there's plenty of huts around that are all, some of them are spectacular. Some of them got heaps of character, and most huts are sort of 1 day's walk in between each one. So there are facilities, but yeah, for me, it's you're exposed, but not like we're not flying in Pakistan. It's exciting.
Your videos do a really good job of describing this, but how do you plan these trips? Are you literally just launching from Queenstown and flying the weather and where you end up is where you end up, or have you typically got more of an objective?
Yeah, so it's really is just to the weather, but in the sense that I do plan the flights beforehand, and I have an idea of the direction in which I want to go and which areas I think are good, and that plays a part in you sort of take that into account on the day, and it's sort of translating the forecast into what's really going on. But I spend sometimes, and especially at the beginning of the season when I'm really hungry for it, I spend a lot of time planning, and I'll spend days before. And I have a joke with my mates. They're like, "Where are you going flying?" I'm like, "I don't know. I haven't looked at the forecast for 8 hours yet," and I'll I've still got another 6 to go. But yeah, I'll pore over it a lot because that's the thing, because it's a small island and it feels like quite a technical flying place, is that some areas can be excellent, and then just the next valley over can be quite different and not very good. So I'll pick the area that I think is really good, and on the day just go with it and go and see how far. And I'll have like a best expectations and a worst. I'll say like worst case scenario, I'm going to take off from Coronet Peak and I'm going to glide to the next mountain and we'll walk up it and I'm going to camp. Cool, that's a good trip. What's better than that? Well, the next mountain and the next mountain after that. And then, well, what if I get to this place? I mean, and you sort of start, it's kind of a normal thing, I guess, but plan for what seems unachievable, and anything in between is just spectacular.
See how it goes.
Yeah.
What are you using for forecasting?
SkySight. Yeah. Mostly SkySight. So yeah, I use some of the other. I use a bit of Windy for general airflow. But more and more, I'm just relying on SkySight, which does a pretty good job here. I mean, it's like anything; it's not completely foolproof, but it's pretty spot on most of the time.
And do you use their model, or do you have HRR3 down there too?
I just use their model. Yeah. No, I don't swap between models on that one. I do on Windy. It's quite easy to jump between the two, but yeah, SkySight, I just use theirs.
And then once you're out of Queenstown, do you have pretty decent cell coverage where you go in these places, or are you then relying on InReach?
Oh, InReach, yeah. You get cell reception when you're above sort of 2,500 meters in most places, but yeah, as soon as you walk around the back of Coronet Peak, you've got even on the summit, you don't have.
That's it.
Yeah.
So forecasting wise, are you, say you're going out for a 3-day, when you leave Coronet, you've got, pretty good forecast, but it starts to deteriorate as the days go by. Are you having people sending you messages on InReach to give you updates, or
to some extent,
looking at the sky?
Yeah, a bit of both, really. So I usually will have a pretty detailed look at the forecast before I go. Sometimes I'll take screenshots, but I just usually try and memorize it. And then, but like anything, any forecast anywhere, probably the forecast changes, and it can change rapidly. So I usually just get updates sent to the InReach that are mostly for safety, and in some aspects towards instability and potential, but mostly like, what's the wind strength on the surface, what's the wind strength up high, am I going to get any gnarly sea breezes, and does it look on for me to keep going? And usually that forecast will fit inside 160 character text that just gives me a bit of a gist, and then with that I'll just go with the day. But sometimes I'll be flying, and just before I start falling lower, or I think I'm getting nearer the end of the day, I might give a mate a ring and see if they can screenshot some stuff and send it to me. I've done that in the past, and that's been super helpful when I know I've got some mates at work who are watching the tracker and stuff. Yeah.
Is New Zealand really prone on the South Island? On the sunny days, is a sea breeze effect almost guaranteed?
Yeah, not every day, but most days. It's a bit of a trick to try and predict which side of the island it's going to come from. It does kind of depend on where you are, and there's some aspects to it that I don't really fully understand myself, with the high pressure on low pressure on which side of the island. But generally speaking, you can say that the sea breeze in Queenstown is always going to come from the south. What time it comes through will vary day to day, but on the really big unstable days, you get strong sea breezes, which are gnarly if you're away from the divide. But at the same time, and this is something which is I've really, over the last few years, that's been a bit of a light bulb moment with my own flying, is using those to extend the day rather than end the day, because we get some pretty cool convergences that happen out here, and a lot of those are triggered from sea breezes. But yeah, you get sometimes in the valleys, and often the valleys are quite wide, so it's not overly dangerous. I mean, as long as you can land backwards in a paddock, you're pretty sweet. Yeah, you can definitely put you on the deck if you don't use it in the right way. But we get easterly coming up through a Mariner, and that feeds a beautiful convergence that leads up towards the Ben House in the direction of Mount Cook. Yeah, it's a pretty interesting spot.
You said the sea breezes are much stronger when you get away from the divide. So you're saying they're really strong out in the flats, and when you're up in the mountains, they'll kind of split it.
Well, it's sort of where so they are strong out in the flats. So you've got some areas where you kind of have foothills that lead up towards the main mountains, and at the mouth of the mountains where it all starts, and you get squeeze points, which aren't generally close to the divide. So my general tactic to try and avoid getting decked in the sea breeze is to just push away from the coast and get closer to the divide. The closer you get to the divide, I find that the more chance you get of linking into some kind of convergence, or it actually weakens out. Sometimes they do come all the way up the valleys, all the way to the head, but usually by then you should be able to soar it. But yeah, there are some valleys that you'd certainly want to stick away from, because they get pretty narrow, even at the mouth of them and for the length of them. But
tell me about your kit. We should have prepared this in advance so you could look at a list or something, but maybe you've got it memorized. But what's your typical kit? And be real detailed about, when you go off for your typical kind of triangle bivvy.
Yeah. Okay. So, it does vary, as it probably does with everyone, but, like if I'm like if I'm going for like 3 days, obviously InReach is a must. Like I wouldn't, and that's one of the things. And just as a side note, that's something that that has really changed in the community here, and probably internationally as well. Is that the respect of using something like that and how important it is to use it. So me personally, if I get to the top of the mountain and I don't have my InReach, I don't go. It's just too much of I slap myself on the wrist, but I go back. But anyway, yeah. So InReach, and then I'll fly with a tent. I've got a two-man tent. It's a big tent. It weighs a kilo. It's an ultralight tent. It's a big Agnes, but it's got plenty of space inside. This is one of my more luxury items. I've definitely spent a bit of weight on having a nice tent. And
I'm with you, man. I like a big tent. I like to be able to sit up and
totally.
I dig it.
It's
I want a house.
Yeah, exactly. It's my chateau. It's Chateau de Kellett. Yeah. I like to have my gear out. I like to be able to pack up my gear inside my tent. I like to sit in there and make food. And, like for me, it's about having a good time. So if I'm not having a good time, I'm like, what am I up to? I'm suffering. I'm getting covered in like mildew and condensation. And, it's just, I'm drying gear out and I can't. It's hard. So yeah, I spent a bit of extra weight on the tent. I take a sleeping bag. Sometimes mid to late summer, I don't bother because wrapping up in the glider is absolutely fine. And sometimes you just don't need it. And thermarest, or like an inflatable mattress, a lightweight inflatable mattress. And then what else do I take? Yeah, food,
you take a stove or you just make fire?
No, I take a stove. I've got one of those tiny BRS. You can get them on AliExpress. And they weigh 28 grams, and they just screw to the top of a butane, the little gas canisters.
Yeah, MSR has one of those too. They're great.
Yeah, super. They weigh nothing. And to be honest with you, like I bought it 3 years ago and I was expecting it to break, almost immediately because it's pretty fragile, but it's lasted this whole time, which is incredible.
Yeah, I've got the same one. Those are great. I've been using it for years.
Yeah, so I use that, and I've got a little 750 ml titanium cup, and I take with me, food-wise, yeah, it kind of depends on the mood sometimes. And sometimes I don't take the stove. I just take like wraps and cheese and salamis and things. But more often, and especially this season, I've been taking instant mashed potatoes being my go-to. It's super cheap, super easy. You don't have to wait for it to cook. And I just throw brie in it and salami and pesto and things like that. Noodles and things like that. But I just really like having a hot meal. And I'm out the back. It's something to do. It's enjoyable. So yeah, I like taking the stove. I can make coffee and things like that.
Yeah, I often find on bivvies, you can do the little morning sledder, but you can also just sit there for 4 hours, let it warm up and have a really nice time. If you've got your espresso, your little thing for making some coffee, and you got a little book or some podcasts or whatever downloaded, then I don't know. I like chilling.
It's not very often that I'll make a sled ride in order to walk up the next hill. Like I'll totally opt if I have to. If I slope land the day before and I land halfway, I'll use that morning to walk to the top, so I've got the best chance, and then I'll chill at the top and make breakfast and stuff like that. But if I'm already on the top, I'm just gonna kick it and make some food and enjoy myself. Yeah, in terms of other kit, fly, use the XE Tracer. I take a lot of power. What I do for power, because mostly I'm just going for sort of 2 or 3 days, so I just take power banks. I don't really run the solar too much. I have done it a bunch of times, but for me, if I was going for longer than 3 days, I'd take it. But here, for New Zealand especially, to get more than 3 days of flyable weather in a row, usually you'll get 3 good days and then you'll get 3 bad days. And by that time, I'd check out. I've had my fun.
Yeah.
So I just take power banks. But to be honest with you, because all the camera gear, especially like last season wasn't so bad because I wasn't running a 360 camera, but this year I do about 10,000 milliamps per day. And that's just because I run a 360 for the whole flight, most of the trip.
So that's you got that plugged in. You're not. It's the camera's plugged into your battery bank the whole time.
Totally, yeah. It would do maybe an hour and a half without the power bank, but it just chews through power. Like it's it works.
So you're using one of those kind of Anchor 10,000 milliamp battery, lithium battery.
Yeah, exactly.
Banks.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
you'll take 3 or 4 of those with you on a trip.
Yeah, so I got one 20,000 and a 10,000, and I usually take that. Okay. If I've got solar, then I'll take like 2 10s. It's Yeah, it's a bit of weight there just in batteries. But then there's a bit of weight in the camera gear too. Like there's definitely at least a kilo of camera gear.
Let's see. I want to ask you about all that, but if we hit all the gear, do you take rain stuff? I'm trying to think of anything.
Sometimes
tarps.
Yeah, so I take based off the forecast if I think it's going to rain, or sometimes I start and it's raining because I'll spend a day hiking before, so I'll take a poncho. I've got one of those ultralight ponchos. It sort of goes over the bag as well, so I don't have to have a bag cover too. I find that just keeps my gear drier as well, because even with the bag cover, it just sort of runs down your back and then goes through the harness, through the backpack. So I just use a poncho. But sometimes, a lot of the time, I don't need to take it. I don't bother. Yeah, and that's probably with all of that stuff, with sort of 3 days of food. The way I sit on the range is about 100% of the range, and for here, I found the flying being right at the top end is pretty nice. I quite like that. But personally, I optimally like 75%. So if I'm not planning a night out, if I'm not going camping, then the kit sort of reduces. And I stop taking as much luxury items. I might ditch the stove and just take muesli bars. I might, ditch the sleeping bag. Sometimes I ditch a tent because I know there's huts. And that's more for just when I'm cross country flying. But I'll have a baseline of gear that I'll always take, that I know that, I'm maybe not going to have the best time, but it's going to be enough to keep me, warm at night and able to walk and things like that.
Trekking poles?
Yeah, I love them. I need it.
Okay.
I need all the help I can get, really. So trekking poles is good.
I can't even walk without trekking poles anymore. And what about how do you handle navigation? What are you using for mapping and are you downloading maps in advance, or what are you doing for that? What kind of stuff do you have on your phone?
So there's a really great app here. It's called the NZ Topo 50, and I'm really disappointed to find out that it's not an international, because it's really great. It's just a topographic map.
I've never heard of that.
Oh, it's really good. If anyone's coming to New Zealand to do bivvy flying or cross country flying, download that app. It's about 2 gigabytes, so it's quite a large app. But it basically has it's the whole of the South and I think the North Island, just completely downloaded, and you can zoom in and it tells you where all the walking tracks are, where all the huts are, and all the contour lines and rivers and bush and everything. It's really good. But that's when I'm on the ground and sort of trying to find the best way to hike places, and I'm sort of scoping out lines for missions and things like that. I use that a lot. But to be honest with you, I also just spend a lot of time outside of flying, studying the areas and getting to know the terrain. And my mates take the piss out of me a lot because I know the names of most of the mountains. And it's because
I hear that in your videos. Jeez, man, this guy knows every single little pimple.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know. Maybe I've got some level of autism or something. I don't know. Like I'm just somewhere on the spectrum in terms of geography. And I don't know. When you're really passionate about something and you love something a lot, and I spend probably a little bit too much time looking at maps and dreaming up flights. Then you start learning all the names, and it's I get a bit excited in the videos and I start naming everything I can see. But yeah, it's I learn the area.
I find this interesting. I think most people won't, but are you boots or tennis shoes?
Boots. Yeah.
Boots.
I'm boots. Okay. And to be honest with you, I think that's probably it's sensible for the terrain that we have here, because we don't have any trails really. Like there's some trails down in the valley floor which could be suitable for sort of trainers, but even those, a lot of the times you end up at a bog and you're going to go through the bog, and then you got wet feet, and you're hiking up through tussock and you're getting stuff in your shoes. I've just been boots, and I find them nice for top landings as well.
Do you bring a pair of real lightweight sandals or something with you, just so you can get your feet out of the boots at night and stuff?
No,
it's pretty nice to just walk around barefoot.
Totally, exactly. Yeah, I just take the boots off.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's nice stuff. Okay.
This will make you upset, knowing how much work you're putting into your editing and all that kind of thing. But all the big films I've done, we've always had a sound engineer take care of what you're doing really well. How are you getting such good sound?
Oh, thanks. I just run a lapel mic. It took a bit of playing around.
What?
A lapel, just like a lav.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I'm out of the GoPro. So I have this kind of helps with the editing too. So the GoPro on the helmet, I've got it's a mic adapter. that you can buy from GoPro, and then I run a Rode lapel mic from the helmet cam down the shirt, and I've got it on the chest, and it's got a wind fluffy on it, like a dead cat. And whenever I want to sort of do some narration or talking, I just turn on the camera, do some talking, have a look around, turn it off. And then when I go to edit later, I chuck it all in with the 360 footage and it matches up. And yeah, and a little bit of magic in Premiere, a couple of clicks, but it's the real trick is using the lapel mic because it kind of sits on your chest.
It's really good. Your sound is amazing, man.
Thank
it's
you.
like it's like you're talking to your audience. It's that's something we have struggled with, but that's great. Oh, fantastic. I forgot to ask you wing and harness. That was the last bit of gear.
So I'm flying the Zeolite GT, lightweight two-liner. Which I totally love it, you know, like, and it's super solid, and it's got the performance that you can push into wind, and I feel really safe on it. And yeah, it's a really great glider, easy to launch and land. That's, I think, actually the most important as well, is that you can put it into tight spots and get it out of tight spots. So yeah, I'm really happy with that. The harness, I was using the Osium, and for 500-600 hours. Then I did over the last season I did the F race, which worked really well. I was and for what it's designed for, which is essentially the X Alps, it's quite lightweight. It only weighs 1.5 kilos. I thought I was going to destroy it in the first month, but it actually it held up really well. So that was great, and it had enough storage, and that was cool. But now I've got the BV1. Which is Ozone's new harness specifically for bivouac flying, and I'm pretty stoked with that. It ticks all the boxes. It's got a ridiculous amount of storage, and it's clever enough that it's when all the storage, it's got this huge storage on the back, and it's all side loaded, so you can inflate the back protection, lie the glider on its side, and just keep throwing stuff in until you can't get it in anymore. And yeah, it's inflatable back protection, so it packs down really small. They have really small pack volume, and it weighs 2 kilos. So yeah, I've only just got it. I've been flying it for a week or so, but so far pretty stoked. Yeah.
Wow, that's really nice. That's always one of the things that makes me worry about bivvy gear is when typically you take the pad out to make all the room, and then of course you're taking on some risks there too. So it's quite nice to have an airbag solution.
Totally. And I think that's the future, like especially for the bivouac and things like that, because like you say, typically everyone just takes the foam out and you just put the sleeping bag and things under the seat where all the soft bit is. But I managed to get all my kit into this and still have full back protection. You could, if you wanted to thick a sleeping bag, you can still do that, and then you just inflate the rest of the space. So I think for this style of flying, the inflatable back protection, I think, is the way forward.
In one of your videos, you were, and it was day 2 or something, and you'd spent the night, and then the next day you rocked up at some comp that was going on. I thought that was really neat. That there was, I'm going to go see what's going on with these guys. Yeah. Are you a comp pilot as well?
No, not really. Competition's a tough one for me. Like I enjoy the city. It's more of a social event really for me, and that's it's great. It's great fun. Don't get me wrong. I really enjoy it, but I need to be careful sometimes because I am a little bit competitive, and I want to find myself motivated in the right ways. And when I find myself motivated too much by the competition, then I kind of sometimes I lose the buzz a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I've done a few comps here and there because I really like racing. Racing your mates is heaps of fun. There's nothing better when you're side by side, you're full bar, and you just shout at each other. Like that's awesome. I do really love it. But yeah, there's some sides of competitions that I'm not too stoked about. But it's that day was just I was just trying to make the most of the weekend, I guess, and I kind of managed to.
That was cool. That'd be fun. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Yeah. I haven't watched all your films, but I watched quite a few. Most of the time, you're solo. I mean, you're often talking. Okay, well, I'm missing. Somebody that this guy was here, and I can't see him. I mean, obviously, you're taking off with other people, but are most of your missions pretty solo oriented?
Yeah, I'd say 90%. Yeah, I'm not very good at flying with other people. Sometimes you just get excited and fly off. But yeah, I often share the hike. Walk up together and share the drive, and everyone sort of flies off in different. A lot of people have got different objectives and sort of different levels of flying, and But yeah, most of the time it's on my own. But sometimes we do fly together and camp together, and it's pretty awesome. We just did a really cool trip. Actually, one of my favorite missions this season. We just took off from Coronet Peak, and the objective was just to stick together. We had a group of 4 or 5 of us, and we just wanted to stick together. Didn't matter how far we went. If we can fly 30Ks, that'd be amazing. But just go as a group camping, and that was actually a really memorable trip. So yeah, maybe more of that to come.
What's your bivvy season? When does it start? When does it end? You know, for people listening that are just stoked and want to come down for a couple of weeks, what would be the most reliable time of the year?
The most reliable, I'd say, sort of January through to end of February. I mean, it's still reliable in March as well, but obviously the days are starting to get a little bit shorter, so the potential is a little bit less. But and it starts to get a little bit more stable. But there's still some excellent days to be had in March. The longest days are obviously around the solstice, which is the 21st of December, and those are our biggest flights. But December, it can be a bit of a wild month. The last few years, it's been largely unflyable. It starts getting thermic in sort of September time, and October you can get some pretty exciting flying in as well, and November. But it really starts getting good sort of mid to end December if it's not blown out. And January is the best, I think.
The island itself is, you know, it's not huge, but there's a lot going on. I mean, in terms of geography and like you said, the west and the east, and how much. And I know that there's been quite a few people that have done kind of the island bivvy, you know, covered the Southern Alps.
Yep.
I guess south to north usually. Are they usually going south to north?
A bit of both. Mostly south to north, I think.
Okay. When you look at the map and you're sitting in Queenstown, is there just massive sections that haven't been flown, or is most of the South Island kind of, you know, the flyable stuff has been done?
Yeah, I mean, there's areas that have been flown more than others. Most of it has been flown. That there certainly are still large areas that no one has flown, or at least not on with any sort of track log in the last 20 years. That's mostly because of its inaccessibility and there's just nowhere to land or take off. You know, like this large.
So is that the west side?
Yeah, there's parts of the west side and the south, in the deep south, in the fjord. There's areas that are pretty much, it's almost like suicide flying. But there are areas, especially just north of Mount Cook, where only not many people have flown. They're pretty, there's some people that have flown through there on these trips, and Nick's obviously an OG who's been in most places, and there's a few others, but there's a lot of it is still unflown or very rarely flown. You get that app. What's that app? You know, in the cross country planner, where you can the Skytrax, and you can look at Skytrax and see where people have been. Yeah, sometimes I go on that and just go, where's no one been before? Why not? Or why can't we go there?
Just nothing. Yeah. Wow, that's pretty exciting. Anything being done on the North Island?
I haven't done it. There is. It's not as much flying going on up there from what I understand. I personally haven't done any flying in the North Island. It's not as mountainous. It's more sort of a flatlandy sort of place, but they still do get some good flying up there. But I mean, if you look at what people are uploading to X-Contest and that, I'd say 80% of the flights, maybe more, are all in the south, and the majority of them around the Queenstown Monaco area. I personally, and it's hard for me to say because I haven't done really any flying up in the North Island, but I think that the best area for flying is in the Queenstown Monaco area.
But they have that comp. What's the volcano? The Mordor on the North Island. What's that place called?
Oh, you put me on the spot here, Gav. I'm going to be embarrassed in front of all my Kiwi mates. Mordor. Let's just call it Mordor.
Right. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I've never
Again,
heard of
I was there before my flying years, but but don't they have a comp there? What's that place called? I want to call it Fongaré, but that's way farther north.
No,
that's called.
I'm going to embarrass myself. It's probably Taranaki or Taupo or something like that.
Yeah, oh, there you go. Yeah, it's Taupo. Yeah. Taupo is the town, and then Taranaki's
Can we edit that so that it sounded like I knew what I was talking about?
No, absolutely. That stays in. It's all right, man. You're still a Brit.
Yeah,
You're okay.
Yeah. But
because they have isn't that where New Zealand Nationals typically is, or is it down where you are?
No, typically, we didn't have it this year, but it moves around.
Okay.
I've not heard of a comp being there. Probably was, but we've had it in Nelson a lot. Nelson's a pretty consistent place for comp flying. We've had it in Wanaka as well. That was pretty exciting. But yeah, it does move around. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
So this season is just ending for you, I guess, down there. But what do you start dreaming of this winter? What are you going to be thinking? You know, what does next year look like? I mean, hopefully things are going to be opening back up again for you guys, and you can escape and stuff. But
exactly. Well, we're being set free. In fact, we've been set free now, which is awesome. So for me personally, I'm gonna be off to Europe. I've never flown in the Alps before, so yeah, I'm gonna go and see my family in England because there's a long overdue visit. I'm really looking forward to doing some flying back in the UK. It's going to be, that'll be quite special for me because obviously I've flown for years and I've grew up in England and I've always seen it as this 2-dimensional place, and it'd be pretty cool to go back and fly and land in my village and go to the pub.
Oh, dude, you're going to love the lakes. I mean, it looks a lot like what you're flying down there. The lakes are spectacular, and again, you can top land anywhere. It's all just tussock and grass.
Yeah, I'm pretty stoked about that. And yeah, so I'm going to do a month there, and then I'm going to go to Europe and fly in the Alps and go to Switzerland and France and Austria, go see some friends. And yeah, I'm pretty stoked to go and fly there because I've heard it's pretty scenic.
Oh, you're going to love it. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. I mean, you're spoiled, but you'll love it there too.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you distracted talking about this other stuff, but I want to hear more about how you're filming. So you've got the GoPro. You've obviously got one on a stick. Are you switching it back and forth between the kind of POV on your helmet and putting it? Or you got two?
Yeah, so I run the 360 camera for the whole flight. That means that I can use that footage for hyperlapses, and which you get some quite nice visualizations from the cloud formations and when you're running cloud streaks. And then I run the GoPro on the helmet, and like with the running the 360 the whole time, it's definitely it's a huge file size. I mean, it films at 5.7K for sometimes 7-8 hours, and it's quite a bit of work to process all of that footage sometimes. But it outputs at 1080, and so I'll sort of keyframe all of that footage in the direction that I want, and then I'll just link it with the GoPro footage and kind of sort of do jump cuts between the two. So it also serves the GoPro serves a purpose for the audio as well, as sort of a point of view. Yeah.
Are the videos, is this become a channel, or has this become any kind of a money maker for you? Does it help pay for your passion?
Yeah, not in the sense of my time that goes into it. No, it is definitely a passion project. But I mean, it's still a very small channel, and at the moment it's just sort of started paying for the money that I put in for subscriptions on a monthly basis to create the videos. But outside of that, not really. It's just something that I do for fun.
Because they're really instructional. I mean, there's it was quite fun. I mean, I kind of figure I know a lot about bivvy. I've done a lot of bivvy flying and stuff, but I really enjoyed the pace, the stoke. You know, you seem like a consummately optimistic, kind of happy bloke, and so you're having a really good time out there. I agreed with Miles, our editor, is that, man, you got to watch this guy. He's having a blast. Yeah, it seems like you're having a lot of fun, but it's also, I appreciate the instructional aspect of it. It seems to come quite natural to you.
Yeah. I mean, as much as I love flying paraglides and doing bivvy flights and that, I also love talking about it. So I kind of, it ends up in the videos where I just end up rambling on. But I really love it. I'm really passionate about it. And when you're passionate about something, then it's quite easy to sort of put that kind of effort into stuff. And it really, for me, like it's awesome to see the stoke out of people. And, when, some people, they take something away from it and they realize that, what, this is possible. I can do that. Look, he's doing it. I can see how he's doing it. I can see the video. I know what it looks like out there. I kind of get a feel for the experience and that. And totally, that's something that I took away from Nick's videos. When I was learning, like I was watching videos of Nick flying out the back, and I'm like, wow, like that's so cool. Like I want to do that. Like, and I kind of understand what it looks like, and it's not so overwhelming when you do go and do it. You're like, I kind of already had a feel for it because I've watched Nick's videos 100 times. It's, so yeah, if I can share the stoke and, you know, put some fire in people to go out there and get amongst it, then that's what it's all about, really.
What are your personal goals? You said that yeah, with flying and maybe otherwise, maybe with filmmaking.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, with flying, I'd love to just keep progressing and just keep. I really at the moment the forefront is just go and fly new places. I love flying in New Zealand; it's spectacular. But I've poured a lot of energy and sort of into flying here now. I'm pretty excited to go and fly somewhere where I don't know the names of all the mountains. So do a bit of traveling, go and see some new places, fly some new spots, meet some new people, and I'll keep making videos for sure. Keep collecting footage. I'd love to keep improving the videos and the video quality, and that's something I'd like to expand. I'd love to try and do some bigger sort of expedition style bivvy flying. That would probably be a next personal goal for me, is to try and go to somewhere that I haven't been before and just go really experience it by going for some longer trips, maybe as a part of a team or something like that, and try and capture that and present that as maybe more of a longer form video rather than just sort of shorter vol biv trips.
We had an email exchange a while back, and you said, I apologize because I couldn't make it or something, and you said, it's no problem, man. I've got 8 terabytes of footage to go through, and I kind of laughed. We had, I think with Alaska, we had 60 something hours, which turns into a 50-minute film, and it was that kind of footage. It was that kind of file size because they're shooting with red cameras and stuff. But man, you are shooting a lot of. 8 terabytes. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a ton of footage.
It's mostly down to the 360 because it chews data and it chews power. But yeah, it's a lot, and it's a lot to go through. I've gotten faster at it, but it still takes time. But yeah, I've got plenty of videos to get through. I'm just slowly chipping away at them. But
give the audience an idea. So for one of your 5-minute films, or some of them are 20, and they're amazing. They're very, very watchable. How much time is editing and goes into one of those?
I think the fastest time I did one was like one full 12-hour day. And still long.
That's not bad.
Yeah, and then sometimes the longer ones will take sort of 5 days. And this is the thing. There's not a straight answer to that because it's a rabbit hole, as I'm sure you're aware.
Oh, you can always make it better.
Oh, you just at some point, and I used to put a time limit on myself. I used to say, okay, right, once you get to this point, just stop, and move on to the next one, and just try to keep improving. But when I'm trying to constantly keep improving, you end up just spending more and more time, and then sometimes I'm just like into an animation that I'm trying to get perfect. But yes, it's a bit of a rabbit hole. Yeah, at times. Yeah.
Okay, on that note, I'm going to ask you one of the survey questions that we got last year. Has flying made other aspects of your life better or worse?
Well, I'm a single dude. I've got no kids, so I can't really say that the family life has has been affected. So yeah,
I was going to say you might not be able to, buddy, with that kind of editing.
No, exactly.
I mean, put up with that.
Or maybe it's just that's one of the reasons. It's one of the many reasons I'm single. I'm sure is that I don't have time. But no, I can't think. I mean, my career in cookery probably suffered because I quit my job, but yeah, other than that, it's been really fulfilling and an amazing experience. I wouldn't swap it for anything.
Are you a chef?
Yeah, I worked as a chef for about 10 years. Which
wow, my last podcast was with a chef. That's amazing.
There you go.
Back to back. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. It's actually not bad of an industry to be in if you want to do a lot of flying and cross country flying, especially if you work in a place that is somewhat flexible and has a bit of a bigger team and you can swap your shift around. But like, the previous years, I'll go out and I'll fly. I used to actually have such a laugh with this, and it helps when you don't mind so much if you do get the sack. But like taking the challenge on, if I've got work at 5 o'clock and I'll go up Coronet Peak and I'll try and nut out a 100K triangle and get back and then go to work, and you spend the whole day. And from the minute I did this a few times, and it was really great fun. From the minute you take off, you can't bomb out until you make it home again. If you bomb out, you're missing your shift. And, you spend 5-6 hours flying around the back. You get back and you get to work and you're 15 minutes late. And they're, how was your day? I'm like, oh, you guys have no idea.
It was better than yours, I guarantee it.
Totally, yeah. But, it does work. Even if I run out from, because we got a gondola in Queenstown. And if I'm working the day shift, I can, sort of run out, go and do an acro lap off the gondola and go back to work. And, that's actually perfect. But, yeah, I did that for a while, but now, and I'm flying a bit of tandem now, and a bit of a part-time job.
So the back to the bivvy stuff. I mean, the terrain does look pretty tenable. You can top land anywhere. The valleys looked pretty nice. It seemed kind of Alps-esque, obviously without all the lifts, although you would at Cornet. But it seems pretty tame. But what were some of the things early on that maybe caught you out a little bit, or what would be the things that, for folks that are listening that haven't yet done their first bivvy, what are the skills that you feel like are kind of baseline? What are the prerequisites before you should really kind of get into bivvy, if any?
Yeah, I mean, specifically for New Zealand, I would say fitness would be the key one, because you've got to do a bit of walking if it doesn't go to plan. I mean, obviously that doesn't make a difference so much elsewhere. Yeah, I don't know. Just keeping the expectations low, and then when you because if you're way too ambitious, I want to do 100Ks a day and I want to make it to here, that you're missing the point of it. Like so it's about the trip, it's about the journey, it's about the adventure. So you get fired up for just doing a sled ride and going camping, and then if you get a thermal, then wow, this is just next level. And I'd recommend anyone who haven't been bivvy flying before is just take it down to its most simplest form in the beginning. Just walk up a hill, camp at the top, and fly down in the morning. You'll figure out so much just from doing that, where my gear fits in the bag, what I need, what I don't need, and all of that sort of thing. I think that's a really good thing to do. But don't try and run before you can walk. Basically, is a good move. But also and knowing where you're going. Having a good idea of the terrain and the topography and which valley's good, which one's bad, and having maps and an inReach if you don't have phone signal, like having the right gear. Yeah, being prepared.
Will you be doing a lot of bivvy flying when you're in the Alps, or is this more friends trip and flying, the established sites?
Yeah, bit of both. I'd like to definitely going to be doing some bivvy flying for sure. What that objective is a bit unknown at the moment. Like I know we're meeting a group of mates in Annecy in June, and we're going to try and sort of fly east. But I wouldn't mind just being a bit of a paragliding tourist. Like I just want to fly to the. I want to go to Mont Blanc. I want to go to the Eiger. I want to go to the Dolomites, and maybe I'll just do a zigzag around with my backpack. And I'm looking forward to flying some acro as well, and going and flying the gondolas over the lakes, because that's something that we struggle with here. Like getting over water is quite hard, because we've got lots of lakes and we've got mountains, but we don't have any roads really that go to the tops of the mountains, especially near the lakes. And we started towing recently, which has been epic. That's been really good. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to just sort of using all of the facilities available in the Alps and top landing. I've heard they've got huts that sell beer on the tops of the mountains, which is just incredible.
They're everywhere.
That's unreal.
It's very stylish, man.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just take a credit card. I'll leave all the tent and stuff at home and just go live the life.
It's a pretty good place to just have a credit card and have a really, really good time.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you just a few questions here as we wrap things up from this survey. People gave me a bunch of questions that I find just really fun. What would you like to see more of in our sport?
Initially more people flying, like just the general growth. I don't know about you, but sometimes I look at people, I think why isn't everyone doing this? It doesn't make sense to me. Like, this is incredible. Like, what's going on? I talk to people in the car when you're hitchhiking and they don't even know what it is, which is, it's fun, you're like, what? You go out and learn and go. Initially that, but also I think more people getting better handling of their wing handling skills. And whether that be in form of acro or training or just practice, like getting more people to be be more in control of the glider, and I think that will really skill people up and give people confidence. And yeah, I think a lot of people neglect that, which I think is super important. Being able to do whatever you want with the wing, fly it forwards, backwards, whatever, and really be sure of when you can. When you've got to put your hands down, when you need to put the hands up. You watch you watch videos of people having muck ups, and a lot of the time you look at it and you're like, that's just such an easy fix. You could have just done this with your hand, and it's just a shame. So yeah, I'd like to see more people do that.
Yeah. Biggest aha moment you've had in flying in the last year, let's say.
Yeah, I guess the most. Yeah, for me. In my flying, it'd be flying convergences and understanding what they are, how to recognize them. Is something that we get quite often here, and it's something that we need to learn more. It's really good spot here for flying sailplanes. It's a bit of a mecca up in America, and these guys, and I've actually kind of got this knowledge from you learn this stuff from them. But I fly a lot on airband. And often I'll be on their channel and they'll go, there's a beautiful convergence setting up here. I'm like, oh, where is it? And then, and I sort of started figuring more of it out and understanding more of it. But when I can knowing when to turn and when you don't need to turn. And when I found a convergence line and it runs to 30 Ks, I'm like, boom, that's it. We're on. And I don't have to turn and I can just keep going. And that really extends the day. And I've done that. And knowing when I can climb up the sides of clouds, and I've done that a few times this season in the same sort of places, and I've started to go like, this is this magic thing that just gives me this 30K boost, like Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm just like zip along and I don't have to turn. So yeah, understanding when I have to turn and when I don't, and using those lines has been a bit of a.
Are you seeing that? Are you seeing these set up? Because SkySight is quite good at picking out convergence because they, obviously it's built for sailplanes. Are you finding that's mapping pretty well to what you're experiencing in the real world?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a part of my pre-flight forecasting sort of plan is looking not only at where the good thermals are and where they're high and strong, but also where the convergence line is, and that's something to look at with the sea breeze, where it's going to come through and where they're going to set up. But often SkySight might not be exactly where it says it is, but it will be close enough, and it might not be there quite on time, but you get an idea if there's if they say like, oh, there's a big patch here that it's likely going to converge, then it's usually there and within half an hour of an hour. But it's more as well, especially for specifically flying here, is understanding where they commonly occur, looking out for them and understanding, okay, well, that's where it normally happens. And then you sort of get to the day and you see the cloud and you're like, oh, that's it. Yeah, cool. And go for it. But SkySight does a good job of forecasting it, which is pretty cool. And some of it are really small as well, because you get what's quite common here is that, just on one side of one of the range, the air mass is completely different. You can be cruising up at 9,000 feet up the Shotover, and then you get into the Matuki, which is the next valley behind out of the Shotover, and it's down at 5. But it's where those two meet and over those ranges is where you get some of the best climbs. And it's quite spectacular because you're flying up at 9,000 feet looking down at cloud, but it's sort of looking at that imaginary line in between the two. And SkySight picks that quite well.
Amazing. Yeah, that's cool. Best tip you've gotten from a mentor or buddy, instructor, somebody you've flown with over the years, something you've kind of gone back to again and again, just, man, that was good advice.
Yeah. I guess a lot of people have told me just to slow down and don't, there's other days, there's no need to push it on the gnarly days. If it's not the day, it's not the day. And there's going to be, we're in this for the long haul, right? So yeah, you don't need I've been out and pushing it on days that I probably shouldn't have been. And I've had some nice flights. They've been pretty exciting and been too windy, but, there's no need to keep pushing it because there are better days to be had.
Let's end on this one, Benjamin. What should beginners avoid?
Trying to run before you can walk, really, I think is a good way to put it down. Just trying to do too much too soon. And sort of skipping steps, and that can be hard sometimes, especially when you're flying with people that are better than you and going places that, you know, are really exciting and you want to go, and top landing in places that are hard to do, and trying to do that before you're capable. Don't run before you can walk. And there's a structured, there's somewhat of a route to progression that people need to follow, and it needs to be respected. And you know, you can't teach experience. You know, do the hours. You know, I mean, I think a lot of people now are much better at not jumping up wing classes too soon. Certainly here, I think that's quite well respected. But yeah, you kind of need to take it easy in the beginning, because that's when you're really most vulnerable. Because you don't, I've heard you say this on the podcast a number of times. You don't know what you don't know. But yeah, I mean, and when you're close to the ground, that's when you're most at risk. So take it easy. Like I broke my back last year, and that was really stupid. It was completely complacent. It was the most minor of back breaks that you can get. Like I managed to sort of walk away and fly out, but I had a pretty rough landing, and just trying to force it in. And when you're close to the ground, you can really hurt yourself.
So you're just top landing. Were you on a bivvy then, or what happened?
Yeah. So I was on a bivvy flight. Really nice forecast. I was pretty excited. I was set up to go for 3 days. I was in one of my favorite parts of the island, and was planning to go and sort of fly up past Mount Cook, and I got stuck in the on the Nauman range, which is in the Hopkins, and I decided that I was gonna slope land and camp there for the night. Which in hindsight was probably not the best move, because it was 3:00 and there was still plenty of day left. Like I probably could have chosen somewhere else, but I found this really cool campsite, and it was right on a cliff edge, beautiful grass, like someone had mown it, like it was awesome. And I really wanted to land there. But if I didn't land there, because it was on a cliff edge, then I'd be down in the valley floor, and to get back up would be hours of hiking. So I kind of forced myself into this. I pushed too hard, and I overshot it. And I was overshooting it. And instead of, you know, I could have totally just gone up and slope landed and put my glider in some bushes, and it would have been a pain in the ass, but it would have been totally safe. But I just start flapping in. And I'm loaded. I'm right at the top of the range, maybe even slightly over. And you flap in, and sometimes you just goes into little parachutal, and you lose 3 meters, and it's all good. But this time it didn't. It spun, and my legs went up, glider went back, and I just landed on the flat of my back, like on the top of my torso. So skipped all the protection, and just really knocked the wind out of me. So I fell from like 3 meters just onto my back. I was super winded, laid down for a bit, for like half an hour, thinking, oh, maybe I'll just get better. I'll camp here and I'll keep going tomorrow. And that slowly realization didn't pan out. So I decided I could still fly. And this is a mistake. And this is, if this is a takeaway for anyone, like I should have, in hindsight, hit my SOS, my inReach. Hands down. And if I was put in that same position again, I would have just hit it. But I was in a sort of a state of denial more than anything. Like, it's January, it's the middle of the season. You know, I'm having a great time, and I don't want to be injured. So I kind of like refuse to believe it. So yeah.
So I'm not.
So I'm not injured. It didn't happen.
Right.
I can walk this off. So I flew. I managed to fly off. I decided I was going to fly down and go down to the road and get myself out of there. And it wasn't until, this is stupid, because there's so much stuff going through your head at the time, I guess. But it wasn't until I took off again, then I'm in the air and I'm like, oh, what if I have another bad landing? I'm going to be really stuffed, you know? And that's the reason you should, you know, like I couldn't have walked down, and I could have just hit the button, and the services here are really great. You know, there probably would have been a helicopter there in less than 30 minutes. And they don't charge you. It's an emergency. They just take you out and take you to hospital. And it's a no-brainer. I should have done it. And luckily, I had a good friend, Jesse Dew, a.k.a. the Retrieve King, came and picked me up. He drove for hours. So, yeah, thanks, Jesse, for that. He drove up and picked me up, and I went to hospital the next day. Yeah, funny story. Yeah, so, yeah, no, sorry, I've got to put this in. I got to the hospital because I just had a sore back, and I slept it off, and I took some painkillers, and I thought, well, I should go. It's still pretty sore. I'll go into the hospital and I'll get it checked out. And I walked in there, and I said, you know, what happened? I had a hard landing on my paraglider, and obviously I've got it on video. So I show them the video, and they're like, oh, that was you should lie down. I'm like, all right, I'll lie down. Like, do you want some painkillers? I'm like, oh, no, I'm not too bad. But yeah, okay, I'll like, yeah, give me some painkillers. And they go, right, we're going to get you an x-ray. And they x-rayed me. And they came out of the x-ray place and they came rushing in and they're like, don't move.
Pinned you down?
Yeah, like, do not move. Lie down. Don't move your neck. Like, and I'm like getting up and looking around going, what do you mean? They're like, lie down, don't move. So all of a sudden, I'm really worried, you know? I'm like, whoa, what have I done? And they go, you've fractured 3 vertebrae in your back, and you need to get a CT scan immediately. So just don't move. And I'm like, geez, I walked in here. Am I going to go out in a wheelchair? Like, what are you on about? Like, I walked for hours. I'm pretty sure I'm okay. And I got the CT scan done, and they came back and they're like, oh, okay, so you said you broke your back before, right? I'm like, no. And they're like, oh, well, you have, because one of those is old, and 2 of them are new. Oh, is it 2 are old? One of them's new, 2 of them are old. Whoa. And I'm like, oh, really? They're like, yeah, 2 of them. We had a specialist look at them, and yeah, you got 2 fractured vertebrae that are previous breaks, and you've got 1 new one. So yeah, you have broken your back. Sorry about that, and yeah, no flying for a while. And I'm like, they're like, have you taken some wax before? I'm like, well, yeah, I guess. I mean, skateboarding and snowboarding, and I've crashed my speed wing once, but no more than I'd had to like sit anything out. But the doctor thought I was some kind of lunatic that's just been shrugging off spinal fractures and carrying on with life, like it's. Yeah, so that was a bit of a shock or a surprise, but yeah, funny story. Yeah.
I've heard quite a few like that where, you'll come into the hospital and people will, say what's happened, and they'll say, okay, we'll just sit over there. And then, then they come running out even before the x-ray, because the doctor, wait, what was the cause of the trauma? Wait a minute. They were paragliding? Yeah. No, they can't. Don't tell them to sit down. Get them lied down.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm like, totally.
I'm glad that worked out. Yeah. There's 2 really good lessons there. One is from my own experience. I had a pretty bad crash this spring before the X Alps here on a bivvy. I was training for the race, and I've put this in the show a bunch of times, so I don't need to redo it here. But, when I crashed, I was so thankful to have my first aid kit, because, I knew it was going to be hours before I could get help, and I could calm myself down. One, I had oxygen, which most people aren't going to have, but we do here because we get so high. And that was nice. And then having the first aid kit was great to just be able to moderate the pain that I knew was coming, just to help, keep everything calm. Obviously the inReach was totally key. I would have been completely hosed without that. So that was also a really good lesson. And then the other is flapping. I'm still just shocked when I see in 2015, I top landed and Sebastian Huber and I did the exact same thing. I top landed at Plan Fay, and just pissed. I had just bombed out on the backside on an epic day, and climbed up really fast and launched in a bunch of stinging nettle. So I was in a bad mood. And it was a really good day. And so I wanted to land and get away immediately. And the first time I blew it, I was too high and went back out and tried to come back in. It was, it's, if anybody knows Plan Fay, I mean, it's that famous launch above Annecy, but it's pretty narrow, surrounded by trees, and there's a lot of wind coming in. It's directly coming in. And, you could back then we didn't even know the fly on the wall move. And not sure I would have been able to do that there anyway with that much wind. But, I've seen Maxime do it on his Instagram where he just comes in there, and just stuffs it. It's amazing. But man, you blow that, you're in a lot of pain. Yeah. But anyway, I forced it and spun it late. And luckily I was low enough that it was a non-event, but it's same as Sebastian Huber did. But I think we forget when we're flapping that we're getting down, each progressive flap, unless you let the wing completely fly again, which the acro pilots are really good at, and that your ground speed is terrifyingly close to stall speed, and you forget that, and it feels like all that pressure is there, each time, and suddenly that stall point, and it's usually a spin, that's what usually gets people, that stall point is much different than what you know it to be. And I learned after that, watching Carluccio at the Monarca in Mexico one year, those guys, he learned in not Cartagena, Caracas in Venezuela. And they've got to put, their landing zones are usually surrounded by barbed wire and they're tiny. And so they've got to literally come in over the top and just come in like a helicopter. And I finally learned how to properly flap watching him he would basically completely go into tail slide. It was that deep of a flap, just full stall and, snap the wing way back, but then completely let it go again, just completely let it. So it's constantly going from not flying to fully flying before he'd hit it again, rather than these little like tink, tink you see everybody do.
Yeah.
And they're really dangerous, those, and I really thought I had flapping down, and watching that video is terrifying, because it's just, what was I thinking, So it's really something that's so good to practice with a ton of height and really do, like you're doing with acro and stuff. And I'm sure that's what caught you too, is, you're trying to force it in, and, I'm just going to come straight down here. And we've got to keep our pressure up.
Totally. Like, for that whole situation, I've got absolutely nothing to blame except myself. And it's totally avoidable. And my approach to top landing now is totally different. And I very rarely use that technique anymore. And I've found alternative methods, which I think are a lot better. And I think it's taking, like what we see, Kriegel and Maxime and Patrick doing these incredible speed landings,
downwind, uphill.
Yeah, totally, which is really impressive. But I mean, we don't have to all go full blown, full bar, nose down in fly on the wall landings, but use that same technique to a lesser level, and it still works really well. It's like when you're flying tandems, you need some energy to get a good flare, and if you can use the same sort of thing when you're top landing your solo, at the very least, holding brake. This is actually the worst top landings, and the most common mistake I see people do is they're flying in with lots of brake on, lots of brake, lots of brake, and then boom, they flare and they stuff it in and it hurts. But if you're holding brake and you can just let it shoot, build some energy, pops up, flare, boom, beautiful. I mean, it's all about having a good approach. But yeah, flapping, it's a really hard thing to do well, and it's a fine line that you run between stalling your glider and smacking in on your back, like it's.
Yeah. And I think that the tricky part there too is, even if you do practice with a ton of height and you're, in more of a quote unquote controlled environment or an SIV or that kind of thing, that's different than when you add the perspective of the ground. When you add the ground and the postage stamp that you're trying to do it in, then suddenly it's, you may have the pretty good muscle memory of doing it at 3,000 feet over, but when you do it like that, it's very easy to just quickly go, holy shit, I've overshot, like what you did, So yeah, it's a great lesson, because there's so many times where I've done it a million times myself, where you get fixated on a spot where you just, you've got the exit still.
Totally.
Fuck it, man. You missed it.
Yeah, go again. Go land somewhere else, and
go land somewhere else.
And that's totally it. And that's something that I fell victim to, because I was so fixated on landing in that one spot. I wanted to land there, and I'm going to land there. And I just completely forced it when it wasn't possible. And the only way to get in there was to stall the wing, which didn't go well for me, and it spun. So like, just go and put it on the slope in a bush and pull your glider out. You're going to walk away from it. There's no point in forcing it. And it's so much better to go around, have another go, land on the slope somewhere. Like, it's, trying to put it on a flat spot where it look cool is just, and that's the thing. I think a lot of people, they see other people flapping and they think, wow, that looks pretty cool, I should be flapping. That's something that we should be doing. And if you don't fully understand what you're doing there, then it's gonna end in trouble.
Yeah, it's pretty high risk. I have a lot of appreciation for wing speed, as opposed to ground speed. I think that we've talked about this too, that when coastal ridge soaring pilots get into the mountains, they can often get in a lot of trouble, because they're used to flying very slowly, because they're flying in a lot of wind. So they've got a lot of pressure in their wing, and they're flying slowly. And so you just forget that relationship is not the same when you don't have the wind. And suddenly, why did my wing collapse? I was flying the same speed that I normally do. Yeah, but you didn't have the airspeed. And so Pressure is an important thing. Like you said, having that, having flare authority means having energy. You got to have energy. I think energy is incredibly important in aviation
totally.
in general.
Yeah.
Benjamin, great place to end. Thanks for sharing that story with us. Glad that didn't work out too badly. And it sounds like that was a pretty good ending for all that. And you got to have some laughs about it in the hospital, which is good too.
Yeah. No, it didn't turn out too bad in the end. I spent a couple of weeks hanging up in the harness at home, and I was back to it. But yeah,
just more editing time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I could do with some more of that. But no, thanks, Gav. Thanks for having me on. Honestly, I'm honoured. And please, if you come to New Zealand, hit me up, and we'll go do some bivvy flying. It's just spectacular.
I'd love to, man. Your videos are just phenomenal. We'll have all that in the show notes for all of you listening. Please go check them out. They're really amazing. I loved them. And have fun in the Alps and on your trip to the UK. And thanks for sharing your time, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Awesome. Cheers, mate.
If you find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. You can give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or however you get your podcast. That goes a long ways and helps spread the word. You can blog about it on your own website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your pilot friends. I know a lot of interesting conversations have happened that way. And of course, you can support us financially. This show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of storage and music and all kinds of behind the scenes cost. So if you can support us financially, all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. And you can do that through a one-time donation through PayPal, or you can set up a subscription service that charges you for each show that comes out. We put a new show out every 2 weeks. So for example, if you did $1 a show and every 2 weeks, it'd be about $25 a year. So way cheaper than a magazine subscription, and it makes all of this possible. I do not want to fund this show with advertising or sponsors. We get asked about that pretty frequently, but for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I've said many times on the show, I don't want to do that. I don't like having that stuff at the front of the show. And I also want you to know that these are authentic conversations with real people, and these are just our opinions, but our opinions are not being skewed by sponsors or advertising dollars. I think that's a pretty toxic business model. So I hope you dig that. You can support us. If you go to cloudbasedmayhem.com, you can find the places to support. You can do it through patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem. If you want a recurring subscription, you can also do that directly through the website. We've tried to make it really easy, and that will give you access to all the bonus material, little video casts that we do and extra little nuggets that we find in conversations that don't make it into the main show, but we feel like you should hear. We don't put any of that behind a paywall. If you can't afford to support us, then just let me know and I'll set you up with an account. Of course, that'll be lifetime, and hopefully you're being in a position someday to be able to support us. But you'll find all that on the website. All of you who have supported us or even joined our newsletter or bought Cloud-Based Mayhem merchandise, t-shirts or hats or anything, you should be all set up. You should have an account, and you should be able to access all that bonus material now. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.